Southern Gothic is a podcast that explores the history behind some of the American South's darkest days, greatest mysteries, and most chilling ghost stories. Hey y'all, last week we returned to Mammoth Cave National Park to explore the legacy of Floyd Collins, a man who folks have claimed to be the greatest cave explorer in the world. Well, while that might be up for debate, Mammoth Cave itself is the longest known cave system, with over 400 miles of underground tunnels and passages that have been explored. So if you can imagine, they've got quite a few more stories down there than just the unfortunate death of Floyd Collins. In fact, if you were to visit the national park today and take the cave tour, you'd get a chance to see some really creepy old stone structures back there in the dark. Structures that were once used to house tuberculosis patients in the mid-19th century. That's right, Mammoth Cave was used in the same way as both the infamous Waverly Hills Sanitarium and the Crescent Hotel. So on this week's Minisode, we're going to explore exactly that. Mammoth Cave's brief stint as a sanatorium. In 1839, over a century before Mammoth Cave National Park was established, Dr. John Croghan purchased it for $10,000. Dr. Croghan had tuberculosis, and he believed that the cave's cool air and steady temperature possessed curative qualities. Aside from the numerous visitors and miners reporting how healthy and energized they felt inside the cave, the doctor noticed that deceased animals and wood didn't decay there. So Dr. Croghan hoped to use part of Mammoth as a sanitarium. Croghan ordered his enslaved men to set to work constructing 2 stone cabins and 8 wooden huts about 3/4 of a mile inside the cave. Each was 12 by 18 feet in size and topped with a canvas roof. But while these quarters might seem awful tight, the folks who paid Dr. Croghan to stay there were awful wealthy. Some had even traveled quite a bit of distance in the hopes of gaining relief from this horrendous respiratory malady deep inside that cave. And relief is what they got, at least at first. Dr. William Mitchell, a Kentucky physician, was the first patient to enter Mammoth Cave in the spring of 1842. Several months later, he told Louisville's Courier-Journal about the positive experience he was having there.
About the 1st of December last, I was taken with a slight cough. I expectorated a great quantity of pus, had difficulty breathing, and was very weak and feeble. After trying a number of popular remedies for my disease without receiving any benefit, I concluded to try the effects of a residence in the Mammoth Cave. I went in the cave on the 20th of May and took up my residence about 3/4 of a mile from the entrance. For some few days, I felt worse in every particular. Though in the course of a week, I became much better. I could breathe with the greatest of ease.
The early results of his experiments made Dr. Croghan so optimistic about finally finding a way to halt the progression of tuberculosis that he started making plans to build a hotel inside Mammoth, fully expecting that people with the horrific disease would flock there for its restorative healing. Unfortunately, it didn't take long to realize that this dark, dank atmosphere was causing more harm than helping. Tuberculosis is a sinister disease, a serious bacterial lung infection that spreads when an infected person coughs or sneezes. And since an extreme cough is one of the most telling symptoms, the disease can spread rapidly. Today, we know that tuberculosis is bacterial, so it can be treated with a long course of antibiotics. But prior to this discovery in the 20th century, there really was little that folks could do. Hence the belief in places like Eureka Springs in Arkansas and Dr. Croghan's experiment in Mammoth. But of course, as time passed, the folks in Mammoth were actually getting worse. Housed almost a mile from the cave entrance, there was absolutely no light, so oil lanterns and a large fire had to be used to illuminate the area, filling it with smoke and ash, which you can imagine was detrimental to the patients. And if this wasn't bad enough, the dampness of the air, which was initially believed to help with recovery, actually damaged lungs even more. Eventually, patients began to complain about the conditions, but Dr. Croghan convinced them to stay the course until eventually 5 of these patients succumbed to the disease and died without ever getting a chance to see daylight again. Then, less than a year after entering the cave, the remainder of the group returned to the surface. Dr. Croghan's treatment had failed, and like his patients, he too ultimately died of tuberculosis in 1849. Now, as I previously mentioned, the remains of the stone huts can still be seen in Mammoth Cave to this very day. But what's truly chilling is in front of one of these structures is a slab of stone called Corpse Rock. It was there that the bodies of those deceased patients were placed before they were returned to the surface. But if that doesn't make visiting this location eerie enough, some say that if you listen closely while there, you just might hear the disembodied echoes of those poor souls still coughing to this very day. Of course, there have been hundreds of purported paranormal events taking place throughout Mammoth Cave since man first discovered it. And while the lingering spirits of those tuberculosis patients aren't necessarily as infamous as the ghost of Floyd Collins, their grim story continues to be told by the National Park Service. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Southern Gothic. Southern Gothic is an independent podcast produced by siblings Brianne and Brandon Schexnayder. If you're a fan of the show and would like more content, be sure to join us over on Patreon or become a premium subscriber on the Apple Podcast app. There, you'll receive access to both ad-free and monthly bonus episodes. For more info on Southern Gothic, be sure to visit southerngothicmedia.com today. And as always, thanks for listening.
Lucky Little Shacks.